Hi, welcome back to my channel. Sorry for that little bit of a delay. Today's video, well, one of today's video, is a book review for Fighting for Space, True Pilots and their historic battle for, what is that? Female spaceflight, I'm sorry. It's by Amy Shira Teitel. I think I'll just go ahead and put the book cover on the screen so you can look at it while we chat. Now, I'll start off like I like to read the author's words, so we're going to do that. Or the publisher, actually. It says, by the way, this came out, I think, in 2021. It says, spaceflight historian Amy Shira Teitel tells the riveting story of the female pilots who each dreamed of being the first American woman in space. When the space age dawned in the late 1950s, Jackie Cochran held more propeller and jet flying records than any pilot of the 20th century, man or woman. She had led the Women's Auxiliary Service Pilots, or WASP, during World War II, was the first woman to break the sound barrier, ran her own luxury cosmetics company, and counted multiple presidents among her personal friends. She was more qualified than any woman in the world to make the leap from atmosphere to orbit, yet it was Jerry Cobb, 25 years Jackie's junior and a record-holding pilot in her own right, who finagled her way into taking the same medical test as the Mercury astronauts. The prospect of flying in space quickly became her obsession. So while the American and international media spun the shocking story of a woman astronaut program, Jackie and Jerry struggled to gain control of the narrative, each hoping to turn the rumored program into their own idea of reality, an issue that ultimately went all the way to Congress. This dual biography of audacious trailblazers Jackie Cochran and Jerry Cobb presents these fascinating and fearless women in all their glory and grit, using their stories as guides through the shifting social, political, and technical landscapes of the time. So, then the back gives us a little bio of the author, Amy Shira Teitel. And I got this as as a print ARC, but because it's been out since last year, I think I got it either at Hoopla, probably my library, via Hoopla, and I was able to listen to it, and it was narrated by the author herself. And as the summary said, it's a dual biography, so we have Jackie's story and we have Jerry's story, and we have the point where their lives intersected. And again, it did say that they were 25 years difference in age. Now, when the book starts off, obviously a lot of books start off with a preface, which this one did, and it tells us what the author did and how hard she worked to compile this book and to bring these women's lives to us in a vivid way that we could feel like it would be to be in their shoes. Then I love the next section. The next section is called Main Figures. So the first main figure obviously is Jackie Cochran, because the story starts with her, and her when she was born, her name was Bessie Pittman, and we find out in the book how Bessie became Jackie Cochran. So her little summary says, after learning to fly in 1932, Jackie became the foremost pilot of the 20th century, holding more speed, altitude, and distance records than any other pilot in the world. She also won multiple aviation trophies, owned the Jacqueline Cochran Cosmetics Company, and kind of notable figures like Dwight Eisenhower, Lyndon Johnson, Jimmy Doolittle, and Amelia Earhart as among her closest friends. Then the next notable figure here is Floyd Odlum, who Jackie eventually married. And then another notable figure is Amelia Earhart. We all know who she was. She lived from 1897 to 1937. Her and Jackie did become friends during the last 5 years of Amelia Earhart's life. The book talks about their relationship and the goals that they set together, and it also talks about Amelia's last trip And Amelia, I don't know, I don't think I noted it in here, but Amelia went all over, like India, Africa. Oh goodness, now I'm gonna be mad. Yes, I have it. I have kind of an eidetic memory, so even though this book is well over 400 pages, I was able to find it. But it says that on Amelia Earhart's last flight, which began June 1st, 1937, she flew across the northern tip from the U.S., across the U.S., to the northern tip of South America, across Africa, India, to Australia, and finally to New Guinea. Sadly, she was no longer heard from after that, and eventually she was declared lost at sea, as likely her plane plummeted into, was it the Indian Ocean? What ocean? It doesn't say what ocean, but she lost her life. So it talks about a lot of other notable figures like Dwight Eisenhower, John Glenn, Chuck Yeager, and then it also talks about our other star of this book, and her name is Jerry Cobb. She passed away in 2019. Jerry discovered flying before she was a teenager and knew she wanted to spend her life in the clouds. She earned licenses as quickly as she could and managed to find enough flying jobs to become a career pilot. In 1960, she took the same medical test given to the Mercury astronauts, launching on her personal quest to become the first woman in space. Now, in this book, we learn who Jackie was, how she ended up in the foster care system. She became adopted, and that's why she went from being Bessie to Jackie Cochran. Jackie had goals from a very young age. She ended up in the cosmetic business. She was making pennies on the dollar, like $2 an hour or $1.25 an hour. But she had a love of the sky, and she started saving enough money, and eventually she was able to start flying. And it took her a couple of years, but she got her foot in the door, and she started flying and setting records and setting goals. And all of this, she was still a teenager. And I want to see when she started. Okay, so Jackie was born. I just want to check for you guys real quick. Jackie was born in 1906. So in 1925, that would make her what? 19 years old. Oh, yes, when she was 19 years old, she lost her son, Robert Jr. Okay? He got burned. It was a terrible accident. He was badly burned. And she lost her son, and she subsequently had a divorce. Fast forward a few years, and now she's a full-fledged adult. It's 1929, and she's now living in New York City. And this is when Jackie started to see life for all it was, because she grew up very poor. She had a difficult marriage. She lost her child, and now she's in New York. And now she starts to achieve her goals. So as she starts to achieve her goals, she had a fight. It was kind of like the boys' club, an all-boys club. And in this fight to fly, she dealt with not only sexual harassment because she was a gorgeous woman, but like, for example, one of the jobs she went to, the guy said, "I'll hire you, but you have to cut your hair off." And she's like, "No, I'm not cutting my hair." So she was harassed, but then she was harassed on a deeper level. Like, for example, in some of the flights that she took, and I know I'm jumping way ahead in the book, but in some of the flights she took, they would take parts of the engine, or they would take a specific tool that she would need in order to do her immediate and urgent repairs in a flight that she was on. She went through a lot. And then the space program started to be formed. So Jackie wasn't content with breaking records and entering into challenges and contests and flying here and doing this and doing that. She wanted to be the first woman in space. And that's where her goals went. at some point she met someone named Floyd. What is Floyd's last name? Floyd Odlum. At the time, Floyd was married, so they kept their relationship on the down low. He got divorced, and eventually the two became a couple, and they were together for decades. Floyd was very affluential at that time, and with his money, with his wealth, and with Jackie's, she had this cosmetic business that was growing and growing. She started using her time to learn to fly, and she became a record setting woman with lofty goals, literally lofty goals, and she did some dangerous things. And as the book went on and on, the years are racking up, and Jackie is racking up miles and experience and knowledge. And then again, the space program is slowly being formed, but well, no, that's too far. World War II happens. Let's go back a bit. World War II happens, and now Jackie wants to join the war effort. She wants to fly, and she wants to aid the soldiers. However, pilots were not... Do I have dead skin? I sure do. I don't know how long you guys have been looking at that. Oh, wow. Jackie could not enter into the war, even though she had a group of women she was training, because you had to be an officer to fly. And she couldn't be an officer because at that time women were not allowed in the military. So those were the years between 1929 and World War II. But she fought her way into the military, and she was able to fly for the war. She formed a lot of groups. One of them was the Women's Auxiliary Service Pilot, and she trained women. If I'm not mistaken, I think there was 40 women in one of the program that she trained. So she was really impressive, really impressive. And as this happened, as the years were going by, I want to see what year we're at. I do have to go back. Okay, so now it's World War II. Jackie is flying and she's doing her thing. The astronaut program flight that wasn't in motion yet, but another woman came on the scene. But she wasn't quite a woman yet. She was a young girl, and her name was Jerry Cobb. And Jerry was very fortunate because her father was a pilot, and he constantly took her up in the air and gave her flying lessons. Now, I'm trying to see Jerry's age when she came. There's two Jerrys. I want Jerry Cobb. 2019. She was born in 1931. So, as a young child, I think she was 11 years old when her father was teaching her how to fly. Well, their finances plummeted, and her father had to sell their plane, so her flying lessons came to an end. And now Jerry didn't know what to do. But you know what? She had racked up a lot of hours during her time of flying with her father. So even though he eventually lost his plane, Jerry was able to find ways to buy flight training and flight gear or whatever she could, and she began setting records just like Jackie Cobb did. Now we get to the point when the space program starts to formulate, and these women wanted to be the first woman in space. But here's the catch. You have the American space program and you have the Russian space program. Who was going to be first up in space? Who was going to be the first man on the moon? And then who was going to be the first woman in space? Was Russia going to be first, or was America going to be first, or was Russia going to be first when it came to men? But this book is about Jerry and Jackie, and was one of them going to be the first woman in space? And if not the first woman in space, considering Russia was in a space race, would they be one of the first American women in space. So quite naturally, they had the same goals, so therefore there was a lot of friction between them. They were pretty much competitors, even though they were decades apart in age. Then there were other factors, like, for example, to be considered for the space program, you had to take rigorous tests. But the tests were blocked to women, so they had those hurdles to overcome. Then they had the prejudice against the fact that they were women. Like, someone tried to press a law that women could not fly because their menstrual cycle would create such chaos within their bodies that they wouldn't be able to handle the rigors of space. Yes, the prejudice was that intense for them. So, as the book was just marvelous. It just went on, and I really liked it. I love the fact that I was able to listen to this as an audiobook, because to me, with audiobooks, you're there. I played it in an earbud. I don't know where it is right now, but I played in an earbud. So yeah, here's one. I have these Tozo earbuds, and you're listening to it and you're feeling it. But because I have the print book, I had this on a stand called a reader, and as I was going through it, I started to notice the pictures, the black and white pictures. And then there were telegrams and notes from the presidents and like Western Union telegrams. This book was fascinating. I loved this book. Here's one from from President Eisenhower's library. Look at that. Okay, and this note here, for example, was a note from Jerry to Jackie Cochran. They were supposed to get together, but Jerry had an excuse for why she didn't get together, and that's the content of this letter. Really, really good book, Fighting for Space. I say go to your library and get it, and just enjoy it. Enjoy learning a little bit about this history. Learn a little bit about the space race between Russia and the United States, and who actually was the first man that landed on the moon, and who was the first woman. Did Jackie or Jerry actually ever achieve their goals? If not, why? What other goals did they set? What other career goals were they reaching for? Or what other combined career goals did they have? Just really, really good stuff. So that's Fighting for Space. Even though I've been holding the book up from time to time, I am going to edit in the book cover and stick it on the screen just so that you can have it. So I just wanted to give you that book review. I'm going to get this edited and uploaded, and you'll have other videos coming up from me today as well. All right, thank you. Bye-bye.